Dustin Young, Lone Roamer. Today, we're going to talk about tire casings, which tire casing might be right for you, and different tires I like and tires that I don't really like based on what I ride and where I like to ride. This won't be a specific review on different tires, but I'll try to be really specific about the different casings. I probably won't name every casing out there because there's so many. I'll kind of be general to the bigger brands. And mostly I'll try to name the casings trail versus enduro kind of an effect. So, you know, think about this as a way to learn about the tire casings and what advantages and disadvantages that they have. For general use, we'll be talking, if you think about, you've got Maxxis uses EXO, EXO Plus, double down, downhill. Schwalbe uses Super Ground, Super Trail, Super Gravity are the main ones. Vittoria, I'm not sure all their different casings, but we'll talk about like their, you know, Vittoria runs tires that are more like a trail tire and more like an enduro style tire. So for Specialized, you've got your S-Works casing, your control casing, your grid trail, and your grid gravity. S-Works is, obviously they're super light tires, very race oriented. You pretty much see those in your cross country world. I have sidewall slashed a pile of those things in my day. They are light and they are fast. We'll give them that, no question asked. They're not tough. You know, their control tire, you know, as you get into that, your control tire is more of still a really light tire. Your grid's the first time you get into a little bit tougher sidewall, still pretty light. Grid trail, you get into a much tougher tire, definitely harder to damage. And then you get into, you know, your grid gravity, which I did a review on their Turbo Levo e-bike, and I think that's what should have been on the rear, was a grid gravity of that bike at a minimum, and then a grid trail up front I think would have been fine. Looking at some of the other stuff with Specialized, because they've got a bunch going on. You've got your T5 stuff, which is more cross-country oriented, your T7, which is more trail oriented. You know, you've got good grip and speed. Then you've got your gravity compounds, which are high grip and, you know, not quite as durable. So think about it as a softer grip. You do see some of the T7, T9 combo stuff where they're, you know, just like you see Michelin uses some multi-tread compounds. Everybody does. So you've got you know, your different compounds of tires as well. So if you want on the rear of a bike, especially on an e-bike, you want not as soft of a compound. You still want a soft compound, but you want some durability. It also helps longevity of the battery if the rear tire is a little faster rolling, a little harder compound, and you want a little softer compound in the front because you want to grip harder when you corner. With Vittoria, you're looking at like graphene. I think it's graphene 2.0 now. I've got a set on my Mondraker. That's what I think the 4C stuff is what comes on the Sierra, which is their sort of, they call it a downcountry tire now. It's a trail cross-country style tire. I'm going to look here. You've got your enduro stuff, which is graphene 2.0 4C as well, but it's a tougher 120 TPI. So you got your enduro and trail tire style casings, and then they do make e-bike specific casings. You know, that gets into a much tougher, thicker casing as well, and they're a little bit different in the tread pattern. Or a little bit different in the tread compounds there, just to try to get higher mileage out of the bike, right? So when you think about different types of bikes, you're going to get into different types of casings. Okay? So when you race cross country, you want a tire that's not going to go flat easy, but that's really light. So they are balancing act tires. And so because I don't have any ambitions ever again to try to race fast, on a cross-country bike, I tend not to get into the S-Works style casings or the really light XC casings. You know, Michelin's got everybody's got a really light casing. And it gets their tires down around that 500 to 650 gram range. So these get to be really light tires. They tend to be really fast. They definitely deliver a better unsprung weight, so you don't have to do as much damping to manage the weight of the tire. And they just roll. I mean, you should be able to roll really fast. You compromise a little bit of traction in anything other than hard pack. Loose over hard gets a little bit much, and then once you get loose, the tire really struggles, especially under braking. Some of them have better corner knobs than others, so you can get leaned over. That's one of the reasons I went to the Vittoria Sierra for my cross-country bike, is I actually wanted a cross-country / trail tire that had good cornering knobs, enough knob to handle some loose, but definitely not going to go railing the loose with it. So, you know, these are going to go flat easier. They're going to be a lot easier to cut, and they're going to be a lot easier to puncture. This is going to be your Maxxis XO tires. This is going to be your S-Works tire casing, or even your control tire casing. This is going to be, you know, the XC version of the Vittorias, and the Super Ground in a Schwalbe, but not Super Ground in Schwalbe was actually a lot tougher than I expected it to be. Almost like an XO Plus casing, whereas, you know, Schwalbe gets into the racing route, and that casing, that's where you get into their real light casings. And then, you know, WTB has some pretty light casings as well. So you think about those types of casings for when you're going to race. Now for trail riding, you know, if you're going to trail ride, think about being at a minimum an XO Plus. You can run a Super Ground. It's actually a really tough tire, but if you're gonna push, like sometimes you're gonna get into rocky terrain with sharp edges, you might want to, at least in the rear, run a Super Trail and a Super Ground up front if you're running Schwalbe. With WTB, maybe the same, go to a tough in the rear and then the lighter casing in the front. Vittoria, maybe run a trail casing in the back. You know, and from Specialized, maybe run their grid Compuund. You know, you don't need to get into a grid trail yet unless you're going to get into really hard trail riding. But if you're sticking this on your Specialized stump jumper, you know, any of your pivot, switchblade, any bikes like that, my Norco Optic, all bikes around that 125 to 150 in the rear that are not e-bikes, to be clear, maybe from 140 to 160 up front. Trail tires are good. Keep your weight down. It makes the bike better on longer rides, but make sure you're getting plenty of traction. So don't go too light in your casing just to lighten your bike up. You'll suffer with flats. If you're getting lots of flats, go up a casing. Go up a casing. It'll help a lot. Now we get into more of the enduro casing. If you're going to trail ride hard and get into steep, rocky stuff, loose stuff, you want bigger knobs and tougher tires. You'll get into the Super Trail from Schwalbe. You'll get into the tough fast rolling or tough high grip from WTB. You're going to get into the grid trail, you know, your T7, T9 kind of tires from Specialized, enduro casing from Vittoria. I'm probably forgetting some XO Plus to maybe double down in the back. Double down pretty much from Maxxis at that point, and then they get a lot more durable, and then, you know, that's going to be that kind of tire. Now we get into e-bikes. So you got a similar travel trailed e-bike, the 140, 150 rear e-bikes, 160-ish up front. You're going to want to run in the back a heavier tire. The bike's heavier, so and you're going to go faster, and you're going to want to run more like a 2.6 tire, 2.4, 2.6 tire as much as you can, because you're going to flex the sidewall. When you come into a corner, you're going a lot faster. Especially if you're pedaling like flat trails, you're going to lean that bike over and you're going to deform that tire, and the whole weight of the bike on top of the speed is trying to deform that tire. So the casing needs to be tougher to compensate and hold tire form, and that's why you want to get into your Super Trail, Super Gravity, tough fast rolling, tough high grip, double down casings, things like that when you get into e-bikes. You might, what little weight you're going to save isn't worth the pain and suffering. Now, if you're riding an SL, like an SL e-bike, what is that? Turbo Levo SL, the Orbea Rise, the Rise AF, some of these lightweight e-bikes that are coming out, and there's quite a bit. Trek has one. There's quite a bit. Super Trail, you don't need to go to Super Gravity in the back. Super Trail tires will be great. Still be mindful, they're gonna be a little heavier and you're gonna be riding a lot faster, so don't break down to a like XO Plus. Don't do that to yourself. You'll still run the risk of suffering a lot more flats. Give yourself some tire. You got a battery, give yourself some tire, and give yourself some knobs. You're gonna want it at those high speeds to maintain high traction. So give yourself that casing that you know that can survive the hard push. The other thing that matters is, what do you weigh? So if you're not paying attention to that, you're really not doing yourself any favors. People work really hard to get a light tire and then they suffer because they're a 225-pound person, or you know, they buy they run super trail casings and they're 115 pounds. At that point, unless you're pushing the bike really hard as a light rider, lighten your casing up. Give yourself the benefit of having that flex so you get that high traction out of it. If you're a bigger rider, toughen that casing way up, double down all the way to downhill, all that good stuff, because you're gonna naturally make the tire work a lot more, so the casing is still gonna feel supple and flex really well for you. So remember, all those things are factors in choosing your casing style. Fast rolling versus high grip in compounds of tires. So sometimes when a tire rolls really well, it breaks really poorly. Sometimes when a tire corners really well, it doesn't roll really well. All these things are stuff that they work on. They try to manage their center tread, they try to manage their corner knobs. Right now I've got a Vigi on the front of my e-bike. It is a fantastic tire. I don't know that I can tell the difference between it and my Magic Mary. I think the Magic Mary in a Super Trail on most trail to e-bikes is the best front tire I've ever ridden. It never falters. It can handle the wet, it can handle the dry, it can handle the loose, it can handle everything. That compound, that casing is supple enough to give you high traction and tough enough to never go flat. I've never flatted one. So I don't know that I'd run it in a super ground on any bike, because it's worth it to me to have a little bit of protection. Again, I don't like tire inserts, so I don't see the value of running a lighter tire in a tire insert versus just the right casing for you. I don't, so I think that's a better way to look at it. Remember, with tire casings, you need to account for riding style, rider weight, types of trails. Like, don't go to Arizona and think that your lightweight tire is probably going to survive. Don't go to Moab and think that tire is going to survive. If you're running around a lot of really hard packed clay trails, like a lot of stuff in Northern California, around Auburn, and all through the Bay Area. Now, you can get into some pretty rocky places, but for the most part, you're into much more hard clay. You can get away with a little lighter casing. You can definitely get away with less knobs. You're gonna get high traction. As soon as you get to Tahoe, as soon as you get into Reno, as soon as you get into loose stuff, the big loamy stuff in the Pacific Northwest, you want some knobs. You want something to dig. You want something tough. You're gonna be pushing the tire pretty hard. You're gonna have a lot of you want a lot of predictability in if you start to drift, where it's going to hook back up. You don't want dead spots in the lean over. So you're going to start working on making sure all of that is part of your tire choice, and that you get the right casing. You know, I have watched a lot of people save weight and suffer the consequence of that decision when we're out riding. And flat tires are no fun. And a lot of it is they've pinch flatted simply due to that saving that little bit of weight. And it wasn't worth it in the end to save 1/8 of a pound on the one end of the tire, because they weren't racing that bike. It's their trail bike, or it's their enduro style bike. And so it just isn't worth it for, you know, your everyday cruiser. Now, you want to go race, you want to literally race. Yeah, you know, and you're that fast and you want to win, take those risks. Other than that, you know, get away from those risks. You're going to have more fun when you're not out there fixing tires, fixing flat tires. And if you've got inserts in, you're definitely not going to have any fun if you're running a Cushcore insert, especially, because you'll be a while fixing your tire and your buddies aren't going to think that's very funny. So toughen your casings up. You'll actually thank me later. I promise. You will be much happier when all of a sudden you have really high traction, you can run really appropriate pressures, and you don't rim tap because your casing can take it, and you all of a sudden don't think about your tires anymore. And that's the best tire you'll ever buy, is the one you never think about till it's bald and needs changed again. I hope you like this video. I'm trying to do some really informative videos about some of the small things. You know, you buy a bike and it comes with Maxxis, you think you have to buy Maxxis. No, you don't. Don't worry about it. Find a tire you love and ride it. And there's like, maybe you love Maxxis. For me, I've come to really like Schwalbe and WDB tires. I love the Schwalbe tires. I've been running them for a couple years. I like the Vittoria actually on my XC bike. I've got them on mine and my wife's. I actually think they're fantastic. You know, just because something came OEM doesn't mean it's the best that you can do. There's a tire out there you'll hear me talk about, it, Maxxis Dissector. It actually came in a double down on the back of my e-bike. That tire is so bad under braking, it's almost unbelievable. You will drift out constantly and it doesn't predictably come back, and that's what I found really fascinating. And I came with the NASA guy on the front, and I mean, I've made jokes about that tire. If you like having to pedal hard while going downhill because the tire is that slow, that's the tire for you. Whereas the Magic Mary and the Big Betty combo on this e-bike were ripping fast, and I've gotten 2 rides now on the Judge in the back and a Vigi in the front, 2.4 out back, 2.6 up front. Pretty impressive so far. Really high traction. It rained in Truckee yesterday and I rode right after, and the tire just ripped through that stuff. You could just go and you could send it, and I ran on a 57-pound e-bike. I ran 25 in the rear and 23 in the front, and I never rim tapped because I'm running the super tough casing. So I get high traction, safe rims, and I can really, you know, push that bike. So that gives you an idea how much the casing mattered, and could help you without having to add a bunch of additional things to accommodate for that. So please like my channel, subscribe to the video. I hope you find these kind of videos informative. I hope they help you make some decisions about what you'd like to see on your bike based on your riding style. If you have any suggestions of other videos you'd like me to do, I love this stuff. I'll do the research and come up with you know, information based on the questions you ask. So let me know in the comments what you think of the different tires. Maybe you ride the Dissector and you love it. I know there are some people that do. I hope to see you out on the trails.